Hi folks, it's me again. I thought we'd have a little dive into the world of Gerry Anderson today, and in particular Thunderbirds. I was born in Barry, South Wales, but I spent most of my formative years in and around Truro in Cornwall, because my dad had a job with Truro County Council. And one of the things that happened in the 70s was with commercial TV, with ITV, which was the channel that showed all the Gerry Anderson shows. It was very regional, so depending on which bit of the UK you lived in, you got some programmes and you didn't get others. And I never saw Thunderbirds when I was growing up in Cornwall. Occasionally we'd go back up to Wales to stay with my nana for a day or two, and I might see an episode then. All my memories of seeing Thunderbirds are on my nana's colour telly. Or perhaps an episode of Captain Scarlet as well, but certainly don't ever remember seeing it down in Cornwall. What we did get was Joe 90, which was the one of the late 60s Gerry Anderson shows, one of the last of the Super Marionation series they did. And for me, although it's probably not most people's favourite Gerry Anderson series, for me it probably is, because it's the one I first watched and enjoyed. And I still get a lot of nostalgia from the Joe 90 music and looking at the models and toys that were associated with that series. But Thunderbirds is obviously the big show, the one that's got lasting cultural capital. And it was a massive thing at the time. It was an hour-long colour television series, very successful in its day. Strange that they really only made one and a bit series of it before abandoning it. Now they would flog it for years. And the great thing about Thunderbirds, apart from the basic concept of the Tracy family and all the rescue vehicles was really good, was that there was generally a disaster of the week with some new invention or piece of technology that went horribly wrong. This was sort of established from the pilot episode onwards with the doomed Fireflash atomic airliner. And this is my model of the Fireflash, made from the Aoshima kit to 1/350 of scale. Try and hold it steady there. Beautiful design. And what happens in the pilot episode is Fireflash takes off, Lady Penelope's aboard, and then if I remember rightly there's sabotage, meaning the airliner can't land, can't get its undercarriage down, but at the same time it can't stay up in the air for very long because the atomic reactor has a limited amount of shielding. So when you think about it, not a terribly good design from a sort of health and safety point of view. But if health and safety wasn't really a big thing in the Thunderbirds universe, or the storylines would have been a lot simpler. But anyway, the Thunderbirds boys come to the rescue, and Thunderbird 2 arrives on scene and deploys 3 radio-controlled vehicles which race along the runway, serving as undercarriage, and the Fireflash is able, after a certain amount of drama, it's able to lower itself down onto these radio-controlled vehicles and execute a safe landing. And the model was popular enough that it featured in, I think, another couple of Thunderbirds episodes with Lady Penelope in. So a really nice piece of design. And the credit for the look of Thunderbirds must go to Derek Meddings, who was, I think, principal model maker and special effects artist on the classic run of Gerry Anderson shows from Supercar, Stingray into Thunderbirds and onwards, Fireball XL5. If you've got any interest in the special effects side of the Gerry Anderson shows and model making, then this is a really good book to have. I bought it in a Berlin bookshop, I think in the English language section of a Berlin bookshop, about 30 years ago when I was living in the Netherlands. So it's quite an old book, but I'd imagine it's still fairly easy to get hold of. It's just a nice soft cover book with loads of interior illustrations and a text by Derek Meddings telling you all about how the models were conceived, designed, some of the difficulties they had with filming, and the colour shots are particularly useful if you're thinking of making a model of one of these vehicles, because obviously you've got, if you start with a kit, you might have the instructions, but you might not agree with their interpretation of the colour or certain details, so it's always nice to have some clear reference material. And there's a still from that episode of Thunderbirds with Fireflash at the London airport. And what's also nice is you get some of the early design sketches by Derek Meddings, so he's showing you how they kind of evolved, you know, from a thumbnail sketch to a fully finished design, and along the way some of the features that were discarded or improved upon. So a very nice book to have. So Derek Meddings was involved with the Gerry Anderson puppet series right through the 60s. I think the last one he worked on exclusively was UFO, along with other effects designers and model makers. And I think his talents then were recognised well, because they'd been developing this technique with the later Gerry Anderson productions of integrating live action and puppet work, and it worked so well that Derek Meddings, that was effectively his calling card to work on the James Bond films. So the later James Bond films of the sort of 1970s, from I think The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker, you really see the hand of Derek Meddings in those as well. So that's where he went on to greater things, you could say. What is involved in building a kit like Fireflash? Well, this is, as I said, this is the Aoshima plastic kit, which I bought not that long ago from a model shop. It's still available, readily available, along with a bunch of other Thunderbirds related kits. Not necessarily under the Aoshima brand, but there's an importer called Adventures in Plastic, who have been putting these kits back out, which I think the packaging is a little bit changed, but essentially you're still getting the same set of mouldings inside. And they're also developing entirely new kits at the moment. So there's talk of a very large Thunderbird 2, which will be completely new to the Adventures in Plastic range. So that's exciting. So I buy a kit like this, and you open the box, and although I've made this Fireflash, there's still various bits and pieces inside. So what you typically get is an instruction sheet, and then some plastic sprues with various components attached to them. So you sit down at with a cutting surface and a sharp knife, and you separate out these plastic components from the sprue in order of assembly, and then you just start gluing it together. You might, now and again, you might have to paint a little bit before you get too far along in the construction, but with the Fireflash there's no need for that. I just built the whole thing as it came from the kit. You have to make a choice at some point about whether you're going to model it in sort of wheels up configuration as it's flying, and that's how it appears at the end of the Thunderbirds episode. But you also have the option to include the undercarriage, and then you can have the wing tips folded down. And actually, I do have a second Aoshima Fireflash kit, so I do have the option of building another one, which I could do with the gear down configuration. But yeah, so I essentially built this. Probably took me an evening to glue the main components together. And you have to take a little bit of care, because there's some transparent inserts there for the windows, so you don't want to be getting glue smudges on those if you can help it. And then once the model was complete, I painted it, and I painted this by hand. There's no airbrushing involved in this. I took a good look at the stills in the Derek Meddings book and looked through my paints, and I kind of worked out that I had a couple of paint shades that looked like they weren't far off the sort of two-tone blue. I think I did a little bit of mixing to get the lighter blue shade, and then I used a sort of mid-gloss blue for the lower fuselage parts, or the intermediate fuselage parts. I think a couple of coats was needed to get a nice finish, but all brushed, and if it's up close you can see that it's brush marked and not airbrushed, but from sort of 3 feet away it looks fine. And then the sort of demarcation lines between the colours, they're all just provided on a decal sheet which comes with the kit. And again, not all that difficult. You just need a little bit of a little saucer of warm water, maybe a few drops of washing up liquid in it to help the transfers separate. And then you can just position the decals, slide them into place. I mean, I think it's one of those things, if you've built a lot of model kits, applying decals is not really an issue. But I remember when I was a kid and I first started making sort of airfix models, then you know, you could get them sort of all tangled up over your fingers. But I think the decals have improved in quality over the years, and there's various products available now to help them adhere. What I do is I wet the decal in the saucer. I let it begin to separate from the backing sheet, slide it onto the model in roughly where I want it to go, and then I use a cocktail stick, just prod it into position. And you've got bags of time to work on decal placement. You don't have to panic and get it right first time. You've probably got all evening before they really start to adhere. And then I run some decal setting solution, which you can probably find in any hobby shop, which should have it. Microsol product, and that just helps it really bed down. When you're absolutely confident you've got it in the right position, then it beds down, and you can handle the model. Then the decals aren't going to come off. And the design of the Fireflash is somewhat unusual in that the crew are up in the tailplane, looking out along the fuselage, and then in the wing roots you've got these enormous open windows. And that's where the sort of luxury passenger lounges are. So once you've put the transparent plastic bits in, you do have to draw in some fairly fine glazing bars using the body colour. And I did that by hand. I think I just trusted myself that I had a steady enough hand. But you could mask it if you were so determined, or even just not bother. It would still look pretty good even without them. And there you have it. You end up with a nice model of Fireflash, which isn't too big. It'll sit nicely on a little shelf. It's not going to dominate your modelling bench. One of the fun things, because it's to 1/350th scale, it's actually exists in the same spatial universe as the Starship Enterprise. So you can start to get a feel for how these two things would sit together if they happen to operate in the same reality. So you could just about park Fireflash on the saucer section if you were mad enough to do so. So I find that thing kind of fun. I mean, I don't know where they got the idea where they got the dimensions from, the sort of canonical dimensions to say that that's 1/350th scale, but it looks about right, doesn't it? So there you are, Fireflash. Just one of many brilliant Derek Meddings designs from Thunderbirds. Hope that's of interest. Plenty more to talk about, and thank you for the comments on the last video, and we'll keep it going. Cheers.